Hey guys, we're working on the VW. I drove it the other day up to my boss's after work, and it was about a half-hour drive on the way home. And when I got home, the oil light was flickering a little bit when it was on low idle. If you stepped on the gas a little bit, then the oil light would go out. So my guess was that it was running a little hot and the oil got a little thin. I talked with my buddy Hambone. He's a real VW guru. He knows these things inside and out. And messaged him and talked to him a little bit. And I was thinking that maybe the oil was thin. I don't know if it's the right weight. You know, somebody might have put 10W30 in it. The book calls for 30 weight, straight 30 in the summer. And he recommended 20W50. So that's what I'm going to run in it. The auto parts didn't have straight 30. Believe it or not, they had a spot for it, but it was all sold. So I bought some 2050, and what we're going to do is, this is the old style, being a 70, this is the old style fan. This is the cooling fan right back here. This is the fan shroud. The actual cooling fan is on the back side of the generator. And it's what cools the engine. VWs are air cooled, for those who don't know. And this hose and this hose are the heater hoses that blow cool air through the heat exchangers and then up into the car. The later models, actually, let me back up. The oil cooler, being that these are air-cooled motors, they run quite warm, like a motorcycle or ATV. And the fan cools the actual heads and the cylinders. The cylinders are behind these tins here, two on each side, 2 cylinders on the left and 2 cylinders on the right. And then of course the heads are out here. You can barely see, but the spark plugs are out here. But anyway, they cool the oil once the engine gets up to operating temperature. This is a dual relief, which means there's one regulator at the pulley end here underneath that regulates the oil pressure of the engine, keeps the oil pressure constant. And on the dual relief block, which this one is, prior to 70 they were single relief. I believe it was 70, which this is a 70. They were single relief, meaning that they only had the pressure regulator here at the pulley side. This motor and every motor after this, of the Type 1 anyway that I know of, is dual relief. There's another regulator at the flywheel end that actually shuts the oil off to the oil cooler when the engine is cold, so that you don't pump that oil up through the cooler and you know, it risks congealing or whatever because it's so thick it won't pump through there. So that regulator shuts the oil off to the cooler until the oil gets up to temperature, and then it will circulate it through the cooler. At least that's my understanding of the way it works. But on the original style, the old style single port heads in 70, it's the last year I believe, the oil cooler is actually inside the shroud, and the fan blows air through the oil cooler, which then cools the cylinders on this side of the engine, which is kind of a bad design, because once the engine gets warm, you're blowing already pre-warmed air going through the oil cooler onto the cylinder head. So they tend to have trouble with these cylinders anyway, especially if you run them hot, you know. But what we're going to do is we're going to change that to the later model, which I've already disassembled in here. This is the engine out of the 75 Bug. And this has got the later model oil cooler. This is the oil cooler here. The fan shroud actually sits right in here. The oil cooler is not inside the fan shroud. It has this adapter on it. And they call this the doghouse style, because this is on the back of the fan shroud is this housing that the oil cooler sets in. And the fan is actually bigger. I think it's like 5 millimeters thicker, so it'll move some more air. And some of the air is directed through the oil cooler, and then there's this tin. I've taken some of this apart last night. This tin goes on here, so the oil cooler sits right here. So it blows cool air through the oil cooler, down through this shroud, and then this one goes on the bottom of here, sticks out here like this. blows the hot air. This is a little rusty. Blows the hot air out the back of the engine, actually out the front of the engine, towards the front of the car. And then all the air that comes out here to this side of the cylinders, 2 cylinders are over on this side and 2 cylinders over on this side. All this air is fresh, cool air. It's not been preheated by the oil cooler. Plus, I think that the oil coolers are bigger and more robust. They have a lot of fins and stuff through there. Whereas I think when I get the other one apart, there's no fins in them. I think they're just the plates. So we'll see. The only difference is this has actually got larger ports for the oil to flow through it. They say you can put these on the older engines. The only thing you have to do is, if you have the right seals, and the only thing that you have to do is bore, there's 2 holes in here. There's a stud here, and there's 2 bolts that go down through a little flange on this side. They're 8 millimeters, and on the old style engine, like in my Bug, in the 70, they're 6 millimeters. So you have to bore those holes out, and you have to have the right seals. Now I happen to have a gasket set that has all kinds of seals and stuff in it. So I'm hoping that the right seals are in there that I can use. I think this is actually one of them. But there's a set of rubber seals in here. All different kinds of seals. These I think for the push rod tubes, I'm not sure. But somebody gave me this. That's for doing this oil filter change there. And there's a little baggie with seals, metal seals in it. So, because I want to pull the oil screen out too, and you're supposed to change those little washers in this bag. I don't know if the camera will focus on it. Those go on the bolts on the strainer, and then these 2 circle gaskets here are strainer gaskets, and you have to change those when you change the oil. So I have to get the fan off the alternator, and I'm not sure if the stud on the alternator and the generator are the same. If they're not, then I have to put the alternator and the associated regulator and everything into the Bug. But that's going to be a pain in the neck. So hopefully the fans are the same right in here, and I can get this off. They're supposed to only be 40 foot-pounds of torque. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the fan off, if I can get it off. I'm probably going to clean this up a little bit and paint it. The baffles are missing on the other one, and the way this works is, if I can get this in a position here, let me set it up this way. When the engine is cold, this goes down to the thermostat, which I messed up yesterday, broke. But the thermostat looks like this, and this expands and contracts these bellows when the engine gets hotter and colder. These move, and what they do is they drive this rod right up through between the cylinders, which open and close these dampers. So when the engine's cold, these will close mostly, and you won't get much cooling air till the thing gets up to operating temperature. And as it gets up to operating temperature, these baffles will open, and they're missing on the car. Somebody decided it would be a good idea to take all that stuff off. So I need to order a thermostat. I got to get the bracket off from that engine because the bracket's missing and everything. This piece of tin on this engine is in really bad shape, so I might try to just cut a hole in the tin that I've got for the exhaust shroud to go through. That's where this comes out. Blow the hot air from the oil cooler out of there. I think it goes that way. Maybe it goes like that, just like that. So I might try to cut a hole in my shroud because this one is in really rough shape. And I don't know if I'll need to change the upper tins. I don't think so. Hopefully not. But because this is a dual port engine and the upper tins I believe are different. But, and plus they're all rusty, and the ones on the other engine are in really nice shape. So hopefully that'll be the same. But anyway, that's what I'm going to work on. I'm not going to film a lot of it because, like I said, I like rock and roll. so I have to have my tunage on. So I'm going to wire brush this housing up a little bit, get a coat of paint on it so it won't rust anymore, and put it out in the sun to dry. And we'll go from there. This is probably going to be a multiple step video because I've already got about 10 minutes recorded explaining how this all is going to work. And it will more than likely not work the way that I think it's going to work, so it'll probably take longer. But that's okay. This is a fun project. It's not supposed to be work, it's supposed to be fun. So you can supposed to get that shroud off of there without pulling the engine. You just pull the hood off, air cleaner off. I think you got to pull the generator, and it's supposed to be able to finagle it up out of there without pulling the engine. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. You can see all the oil up in here. That's because these engines are known for having high crankcase pressure. The only vent is this tube and this tube. It's like PCV, and it spits a bunch of oil up in the air cleaner here, which then drips down and runs all over the top of the engine. I'm going to order a breather box for that, which puts a hose on each of the valve covers to help eliminate some of that pressure. I'm going to order this seal. You wouldn't think that this seal would be very important, but apparently it didn't get replaced when somebody had the engine out. There's also one in the back that goes up over that shroud there. The ones that's all mangled on here, I can show you better on this. There's also a seal that goes up around this and seals the back of the engine. I keep saying the back, it's actually they consider it the front of the engine. It's towards the front of the car. It seals that to the body, and there's a seal that seals this to the body, because the fan draws air from up here through the back, through these vents here, and through the vents in the hood, the engine compartment. And if the seal is missing, it can draw the hot air that's blowing out the bottom right back up through here and not cool the engine efficiently, which also may be why it heated up a little bit more than it should have. So I'm going to replace that. I'm going to order this gasket too. It's only like $3 for this engine compartment lid gasket. Got a whole list of stuff, like $200 worth. But that also includes an external oil cooler, which I'm not going to order at this time because I think changing it to the doghouse style will drastically fix that. Hambone seems to think so. So we'll give it a shot, because I can always put an external cooler on it at a later date if I need to. The doghouse cooler will definitely benefit anyway in the long run in cooling the cylinders and the heads. So that's what we're doing. So moving on. I'll catch back with you guys in a bit. Alright, I got the generator, the carburetor, the trunk lid or deck lid, and the fan shroud and everything out. Here's the oil cooler. It doesn't look plugged or anything, but there's a lot of burnt on, dried on oil here, and it's a little wet right around here, so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe this is leaking a little bit, and maybe that's where all the oil's coming from, or at least some of it, because it does look wet right around here. So and I was right, there is no fins on it. It's basically just tubes that the oil must flow up through and then back down through. But the down through the cylinders look pretty clean. The guy said the motor had been rebuilt, and I would suspect that it had because all the tin is painted and everything, but I don't really know for sure. But the heads look really clean, the jugs look pretty clean, you know. And I do have the bigger fan, the ductwork, the baffles, that piece of linkage hanging over here, painted, and the fan shroud is way down there, drying. I painted that with aluminum paint to make it shiny because I don't have any of the green. So that's drying down there, and the fan shroud I took off, it's in here. I got to get the generator unmounted and get the fan off from this and see if it's the same as the other fan. I'm hoping that it is. I would believe that it should be. This is where it bolts on the alternator that was on the 75. And there were some shims and stuff on here, which I've saved. But actually they're right here. And I believe you use those to space the fan. But yeah, we're making progress. I'm thinking though that this oil cooler is much more efficient, I would think, because it's made like a little radiator. So if I can make it work, which I should be able to, should be much better cooling. Plus, like I said earlier, the oil cooler is not in line with the air going to the cylinder. The fan stops here and it's in its own little doghouse. We'll go back out here. You can see that most of the cooling air from the fan, which sets right here, blows through the oil cooler and then down through those fins. So this has already been preheated when it goes down there. Some air will get by that's not preheated, but not as much. So it's much better with the doghouse kind. So I'm going to go ahead and get this torn apart, and that might do it for tonight. It's 6 o'clock. I'm going to go in and get cleaned up. I might pull the oil cooler off of that just to see what it looks like, the adapter and everything. And yeah, we'll go from there. Tomorrow's another day. So I'll probably upload this part tonight. So thanks for watching, and tune in for the next part tomorrow.